Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our Healthy Habits for Working from Home this summer and beyond session. Today is a very special program because it's a combination CLE and educational seminar. So joining us, we have Pili interns, fellows, as well as advisors and pro bono volunteers. And making this an extra special session, if you stay on after this educational seminar, we're going to do small group breakout discussions about today's topic, but then also how the summer is going for everyone. This is mostly geared towards law student interns and graduate fellows working at public interest agencies this summer, but advisors and other attorneys are welcome to stay and join in on the conversation. And each group will have at least one breakout leader who will help lead the conversation. But we'll talk about that more towards the end of the session. And I'll pass it off to Jessica Schneider to give us more information about today's program and our speakers.
Great, thanks Brent, and thanks to those who are joining us as part of the virtual pro bono CLE series. We're excited to be doing this joint effort with the interns and fellows. Today we're talking about healthy habits for working from home this summer and beyond. Obviously, we are at a very crucial point in terms of what could be called the new normal of working from home or going back into the office, and how we talk about our boundaries, engagement, and avoiding professional isolation. This will be for our mental health CLE credit. You will get a link to the evaluation. Please fill that out when you can. It's the easiest way for us to track your attendance if you do want CLE credit. And we will make sure that you get that link. Also, feel free to use the chat for questions during the presentation. Our presenters today both come to us from Land of Lincoln. Fawn Pettet is a staff attorney in the Western Regional Office in Alton, Illinois, and that office serves 12 counties in Western Central Illinois. She's been with Land of Lincoln for 6 months. She started deep into the pandemic, so brings her perspective on that, and mostly focuses on family law and orders of protection. But she has also been a social worker in Idaho and later in Tennessee, and has worked in several different capacities. She has her JD MSW and also completed a social work graduate program at the University of Memphis. And then we also have Susan Zielke, who's the managing attorney of the Eastern Regional Office of Land of Lincoln, which is located in Champaign. That is also a regional office of 14 attorneys, which serves 15 counties in East Central Illinois. And she has been with Land of Lincoln for 24 years, starting off as a law student, like some of you. Her current caseload focuses on cannabis and other criminal record sealing and expungement, but she supervises many programs in the office and is also a member of the Pili Board of Directors and several of our Judicial Circuit pro bono committees. So we are very happy to have them with us today, and we thank you for joining us, and I will hand it off to Susan and Fawn.
All right, thank you. I'm going to share my screen here. And we should be able to get rolling. All right. So we are focusing on healthy habits for working from home this summer and beyond. I'm Fawn. I will begin talking as the intro kind of introduced you to us. I am brand new to the legal field. I actually did my 6-month evaluation just yesterday. So I am still very new and learning a lot with Land of Lincoln. And so really what I'm speaking to is coming in as a new employee in this field that is highly regulated and demanding. So entering the field and entering a new workplace. And that's a lot of moving parts, I think, for people to tackle. Let's see, moving forward today, I'm going to really focus on my overarching themes of health and accountability. I think that will trace through everything else I'm going to talk about, which focuses on balance and boundaries and how we serve our clients. Susan, with all of her experience and as a managing attorney, will speak to the employer's viewpoint. All right, so health and accountability. obviously we're talking about COVID, taking a historical look just briefly. When we look at COVID versus other pandemics, COVID really hasn't been that much of a devastation as far as population loss. When we look at the Black Plague, the Spanish flu, even the modern HIV pandemics, they're actually been deadly, but I think this is a unique pandemic in that we are so much more connected. I know if somebody from my childhood who lives 2,000 miles away has had a family member pass away often now. And that's not something we've ever had to tackle before. So we also have more knowledge, and we are able to be more proactive with our technology. And I think we've just seen that on the ground in our workplaces, as well as rolling out health information to the broader public. In our personal lives, we know that COVID led to a quick lockdown. I was in my final semester of law school. I came back from spring break, and all of a sudden everything's online. We had no graduation. My internship fell off, and so I wasn't able to get that in-person practice that I had really been hoping to garner before I graduated. And then we're learning to work from home for the first time for most of us. This has been what I think of as like a roller coaster, or even a haunted house. We don't know what's around the next corner. And now we've been into this thing for over a year, and we're starting to shift maybe back into workplaces, maybe a hybrid. And so we still don't know what that looks like, and we are literally making it up as we go. I trust that people have been exposed to a lot of the research on COVID and its effects on us. Most of my goal is to talk about the very on the ground practical things that we can do versus so much of the background. But I think it's worth mentioning that being in a state like the haunted house, you have your heart beating, you're hyper vigilant, and that would be fatiguing if you never got to leave the haunted house. Like, okay, I want to go back to my old life. And so that fatigue and that hyper vigilance does take a toll on us. And so as we move forward, I think we are at a good place to think about what's been thrown at us and what we want to do with it. And this is where I really feel for managers and employers. Like, I don't know, you guys make it up and tell us what we're doing. And I think Susan's going to speak to that a little bit more. But us as new employees, I think there's more onus on us to be responsible for how we deal with our own mental health, how we deal with our own daily schedules, if we're not going to be in the office to have that direct contact with the people that are guiding us. So when we think about the role of employers in health and accountability, since the 1940s, with World War II, there was this pressure on employers to stop increasing wages. And the employers found they could offer health insurance, and that was tax-free. And so in our society, it made sense for employers to start offering health insurance. So they're not just an employer anymore, they're also involved with our access to healthcare. This has continued to grow. We have tax-free dollars through our employers that we can put toward our childcare, toward gym access. We have wellness committees. So our employers, I believe, have increasingly understood that they are accountable to us for part of our well-being, and that they are involved with our health. And we can look across industries and see industries that have healthy people and industries that don't have healthy people. So that's a reality, as much as some people may not pretend that it is, or pretend that it is not. I would posit that it is. Also, our employers are part of our community, and this is our first time in the broad scope of human history that we haven't lived in clans or in multi-generational homes, and we increasingly depend on our employers and work environments for our sense of community. I think that existed long before COVID, and I think COVID helped us be aware when we are no longer leaving our houses to go to work, or maybe we don't leave our house to go anywhere on a daily basis then. So part of health and accountability, employers are involved with our sense of community. Many people in COVID started to experience not having any physical touch. If they live alone and they're not seeing coworkers, they're not shaking hands, they're not giving hugs to the people maybe they've been working with for 15 years, a little side hug. That is a loss. And that is something our employers have been providing that we probably weren't recognizing. And then also, like I've said, that the practice of law is stressful. And in public interest law, there's different types of stresses. And we are practicing and learning on real people. Thankfully, I'm glad I'm not a surgeon. I know I'm practicing on people, but I'm glad I'm not practicing on that level of a person. However, there's stressors associated with that. And I've been very happy and lucky that my employer, I think, has done a great job of recognizing the stressors that exist just in the practice of law. And so I would argue that legal employers have some accountability to us for those stressors. Okay, so that leads me to speak about what are the employer's obligations and what are the employees' obligations. I've kind of so far been focusing on the obligations of employers, but with employees, we have increasing obligations when we work from home. We need to manage our personal lives in a way that we've never had to before. I'm going to talk about how we balance and form boundaries in our homes since that's where we're working now. I think one of the things that is hard in modern society that I would invite us to do through the rest of my talk is to use reflection and contemplation. I do think as a whole in society and within the legal field, I know my law school was starting to encourage meditation and mindfulness practices. And I think, so we say, oh, I'm doing the mindfulness part and I'm doing the meditation part, but I think that we still are sometimes missing that contemplation part, the part where I step back and think through what is working for me and what isn't working for me. So most of the information that I'm going to be covering, I don't think is earth-shattering, but I'm largely inviting you to think through the things as I'm talking about them and use the chat to chime in whenever you have an idea, because we're all here making it up as we go, and maybe you've found an approach that works well for you. All right, moving on, balance and making the most of where you are. I wanted to be conscious of the fact that a lot of us are splitting our time in multiple locations now. So my meme here, this has been largely one of my coping mechanisms. When I work from home, I find the snacks really well. So this is a reflection of me, Alice there in Wonderland. All right, so as we're looking at these hybrid settings, I would invite people at this moment, if you don't mind, to turn on your camera for a few moments. And I would like you to find something that is in your setting that is a distractor for you. If you're working at home, what has been a distractor? If you're in your office, and I think that the cell phone is like the easiest one, so I'm going to challenge you not to just pick up your phone. So if I could give everyone even just 30 seconds go off camera, find what you use as a distractor in your work setting that you're in today and bring it back. And I want you to hold it up and we're going to show and tell. I'm hoping to get to see you guys too. Let's see. Ooh, people are showing up. I see books and tablets and headphones and dogs. I would have gotten my cat, but she's not very compliant. Oh, I don't know what oh, that's like a Nintendo Wii and some knitting. Oh, you guys are creative. I have somebody that's outside with their dog. Yeah, that would be tempting. Oh no, Rachel, you do dishes with your free time? I'm so sad. No, some of you like to clean.
Okay. See all the mess.
Okay. All right, cool. Thank you all for humoring me. Let's see if I can get my view back. Okay, great. Yes, I already mentioned food is mine. So my office at home is upstairs, and to come into the rest of the house, I have to go through the kitchen. And that's been real dangerous for me. So I need to really work on that balance piece. One of the things that became maybe a distractor or a like, ooh, I'm working from home, I can get away with this all the time, is I started drinking like 8 cups of coffee a day because I was sitting near my coffee pot. I didn't need just like 1 cup to like grab and go and be done for the day. About 3 weeks ago, I realized like, you know what, 8 cups a day is probably too much. That's, you know, like it was only 3 cups if I use like my huge cup. So I did some research, and while this might look like iced coffee, this is very hippie. Roasted dandelion root is really good. Kind of probably more hippie than what most people are into, but we all got our things. So pets, definitely, I saw a lot of examples of that. People who have kids at home have made it through amazing hurdles and have really had to figure out how to do the shuffle. And I admire people who have young kids at home that have made this work. So as we think about what these distractions are there good aspects to those that we would like to integrate into our workspace? Can I do better at, maybe for me, actually taking a lunch break and having a snack? Oh, maybe that's something I could start to do at work. I've also just last week discovered that I have a coffee shop across the street from my office. So now that I'm not drinking as much coffee, if I do really need a true escape, I can start to do that more often. And so I think one of the benefits of working from home was finding our comfort zones and the things that we like, and what can we pull from our home to our office, and vice versa. Maybe in your office you had a standing desk and you've had to do without on that, working from home. Maybe in your workspace, in your office, you have a filing system that works really great. How can you duplicate that at home? And so I think that we kind of have that opportunity again to reflect on what is actually beneficial to us, and how we can duplicate that across spaces. If there's any comments, I would invite people right now to go ahead and share in there. If there are things that they have already started to share or started to duplicate and take across settings. Let's see, ooh, I do have some chat. Continue taking walks during the lunch break. I love that one. Let's see, getting ready every morning, regardless of at home or in the office. I respect that. I probably have gone the other direction where I just have like, you know what, I didn't really need to be doing my hair and makeup anyway, so now I don't do that for the office either. I kind of given up makeup a few years ago, but after COVID, it's this lipstick's pretty rare for me. One of the things that I think has been a loss that we need to be conscious about how to reintegrate and deal with is our commutes. For me, the commute is an opportunity to connect with friends across distance. So most of my friends from a long time ago live out on the West Coast where I'm from. And that's my opportunity to catch up with people. And I have stopped talking to people back home so much just because, one, I'm sick of looking at screens all day. And so we use the Marco Polo app. It's an app that's worked well in my life to communicate across distance. But for other people, commutes are very important formal endings and beginnings of the day, as well as a separation of space. So I get that time to either gear up or wind down, as well as I shut the door on whatever was on my desk. I don't have to think about it, and I physically leave that space. And that's a lot of not our reality anymore. I'm gonna peek here at these chats. Sometimes moving working spaces throughout the day to have a change of scenery. I like that as an integration. I would consider that a big positive. And now keeping up with friends via Zoom. And having that group, I agree, like having the group to check in with has been great. So other parts of commutes that really, I think, mean different things for different people. Being able to play music, being able to zone out, and also an opportunity to have no demands. So although it's not great for the environment, most of us during the commute are by ourselves, and there's silence if we want silence. And that's a great transition piece. And so I think it's worth stopping to think, what have I lost in that was important to me, and how can I find a new way to do that? For me, it's easy for all of my daytime worries to start to gear up on my drive and then maybe start to gear down when I'm headed home. But without that separation or zone time, I don't stop thinking about it. And so I've had to choose to be more aware of where my mind is wandering, and if I'm thinking about cases at night when I really should be sleeping, because that's going to do me more benefit at that hearing the next morning than laying awake thinking about the same issues over and over. So I have to use thought stopping, and that's kind of a behavioralism trick. Some people wear a rubber band when they are thinking about, or they're going to try to stop smoking, and they'll snap the rubber band when they're trying to stop smoking. So a potential that I could do is wear a rubber band when I'm thinking about work, and just a little snap, just that, oh yeah, I'm not spending my time thinking about work because I'm not at work. But I encourage you to think about those pieces of losing your commute. And related to that is life outside of our house. I don't know if anybody else has this problem, but since I don't leave my house anymore, it's really hard to go like buy a birthday present for the other person who lives in my house because I have no reason to be out of the house. I can't just swing by whatever store on the way home. So I have a lot of errands that don't get done anymore because I don't leave my house. Obviously that doesn't work long term. One of the things that I need to be conscious of. Another item when we think about balance and making the most of where you are is our attire. So a lot of us got the opportunity to do hearings in in our suits, or like the top half of us was in a suit on virtual world, and the rest of the day we just tear off that suit jacket or whatever we can get away with when we're working from home with those virtual hearings. And so that's one thing I think I'm somebody that needs to be careful with that, because it would be easy for me to be too casual across all settings. So, how do we maximize our comfort while upholding that professionalism that is still required of us? And every judge, I think, that I was in front of virtually, I've now seen in person. They do know I have a bottom half of a body, and thankfully has been properly clothed, not in my sweatpants or something. All right, so this piece is a little bit less, I think, due to workspace, but I think it kind of goes along with workspace, is physical movement. So humans are meant to move. Our heart and cardiovascular systems, our digestive systems, all work better when we move. Our bodies, to digest correctly, need physical movement, and just sitting decreases the number of fats and sugars that you burn. So we have all sorts of cancer, heart disease, diabetes, and other serious chronic illnesses that have been increasing now for decades, as we've increasingly sat for our jobs. But at least I used to get up and go to my car and parking in a parking lot and walk in the building. And then I had to go to the printer that was in the shared printing room and back and forth throughout the day. And so, like the person had mentioned earlier, taking walks on their lunch, that's really great. And as we have more opportunity to maybe be in charge of our schedules working from home, can I fit in a 15-minute yoga routine in the middle of the day if I start working 15 minutes earlier? We know from science that one workout a day and one set of physical movement is not as beneficial as several small movements to keep that ongoing movement. So I would suggest that we have a freedom in working from home that we definitely don't want to lose the opportunity on. Okay, I'm going to talk about boundaries next. So boundaries and work culture. So I've already talked some about how home is kind of our safe space, our comfortable space. We aren't used to having to dress nicely at home usually. And hopefully you don't have to assert as many boundaries at home. Hopefully you're surrounded in your home by people that respect your space. And so now that we have virtual interactions a lot with people who I likely would never invite into my home, not because they're not wonderful judges and opposing counsels, but I just don't have that relationship with them. So they're getting a view of our homes, but also how are we treating our homes? We might have other roles at home. You might be a parent or become a parent, and that used to be who you were at home. You were mom at home. You were a parent at home. And now you're not wearing a parent hat the whole time. How does everybody else respond to that? I assume for most people with kids, you've already had to start to navigate those pieces. For me, my cat has become much more demanding. She understands that I am at home for her benefit. And that's become around the clock, like visits and crying during the day. And so it's a reality. Before I talk a lot more about boundaries, I want to think about culture. I think of culture kind of as an ethereal concept. For me, I learned about it, clothes and customs, and like those are vague, not very useful ideas of a culture. When I moved from Boise, Idaho to Memphis, Tennessee in 2012, I can tell you that culture is more than just food and clothes. There's a lot of things that you learn when you change the region of the country you live in. But similarly, work culture. I had a hard time wrapping my head around work culture. And one of the recommendations, I think, when I was preparing for interviews, thinking about what do I ask the employer? Like, I don't know, please give me a job. Do you like me? Will you hire me? Like, those are the questions that you can't ask. So what is it that you can ask about that is important to suss out around work culture? And I would invite people again to type into the box. When you start a new job or a new internship, what is it that you usually sit back and watch what people do to figure out what the rules are? What pieces? So for me, we do 6-minute time increments. Where's the, like, I use the bathroom thing for the time entry. So I'd encourage people to type in what they usually sit back and like to watch people. For me also, I had, how do I request vacation time? Do people eat at their desk? Is that something that people think is gross, or is that antisocial? Or are we all kind of eating at our desk all the time with our little like bag of peanuts stuck away in the drawer? Other things that we normally like to watch and mimic, I would suggest, include figuring out what the unwritten policies are and what the written policies are that nobody actually follows. Like, yeah, that policy was written 15 years ago and we like it in theory, but nobody follows it. And so if I go home with the policy book and I read the manual, I think I need to jump through these hoops, and I don't know that nobody else is jumping through those. I have, lots of ideas. Great. So I'm seeing interruptions, asking for help. Absolutely. What is the open door policy? I definitely have felt that one. Does my boss prefer that I email her or text her, or when I'm in the office, can I just walk in her door? Some people don't want you just barging in. Some people like to have a text or an email. So ask somebody who seems friendly. Yes. And when you are hired or start an internship during COVID, who's friendly? I don't know. They all said hi and waved at the mandatory Zoom hearing or meeting. So I definitely agree. Administrative things, yes. So how to use the scanners, the printers, how do you save files? What is the dress code? Those were things for sure that I felt like I had a delayed catching up on because I didn't have the opportunity to mimic. And there's so many things that I was called our employers landlords. That was a leap. Sorry about that. That our employers, it's hard for them to think to tell us the most mundane, unexciting of these things. But I agree. The non-work socialization. Yeah, I was like, hey, I've been standing in your doorway chatting with you for a few minutes. How do I put that in my time? Or do I put that in my time? Am I allowed to talk to you about anything between 9 to 5 that isn't work related? Because I don't know how to capture that. So yes, I think those are exact types of things that I've struggled with. And one person put, who do you ask for these things? Our managing attorneys, I know in our agency, are very busy. They do a lot of different things. And so answering my mundane questions of the how do I stuff, whether that is as an employee or a new attorney, maybe there's somebody that I should be asking instead. But that person has their own caseload. And so if it's not spoken, who do I ask? And also, if you want to find out what the unwritten policy is or which policy you don't follow, maybe you don't want to ask your boss. But if you're asking one of your coworkers, is that coworker secretly your boss's best friend and they're going to hear all of your stupid questions? I don't know. So anyways, these are things that you have to figure out how to navigate. And honestly, for me, the answer on most of that is humility. We have to, I think, have more courage as new employees and new attorneys to just admit what we don't know. I've had pretty good luck with that in front of judges even. Oh, I didn't know I needed to prepare that. I apologize. And it's okay, and we move on. It really has not blown up in my face yet to just practice humility. I think opposing counsel can be a challenging group because I want to practice humility with them. However, when we are kind of needing to bluff maybe to maybe get a negotiation, if we don't have the strongest case, maybe I don't want to lay all my cards on the table that I don't know what I'm doing. So those are, I think, tricky things to learn, especially when we don't have a coworker that we can follow in person. One of the things that the legal field is getting better at, I would argue, at least through my law school and my employer, I've been able to observe is the recognition of mental health. So I started off by talking about our mental, I'm sorry, I started off talking about our employers' roles in our lives, and they're increasingly our community. And certainly if one of our coworkers came through the office doors with blood coming from their head, we would say, whoa, I think that I need to say something to you and address this. Do we do that in our workplaces when it comes to mental health? When we start to see the signs of, hey, I think somebody needs to say something and offer assistance at the very least, is that appropriate in the workplace? I would argue that it is, but I was a social worker for a decade, so I don't come necessarily from the same background as most people. And so I think, again, that comes with humility. Offering assistance and asking for assistance requires humility, and it requires it on our part to speak up when we are lost, when we are struggling. And one of the biggest things that I have learned early as a professional is when there's something I feel like I can't maybe admit to my supervisor, that's the time that I need to be admitting something to them. If there's something that I'm like, I really would love if my supervisor didn't find out about this, it's probably the best time to do one of those like drop in, knock on the office door and be like, okay, so here's the thing, and just lay it flat. That's how you get out of problems. And especially as, again, a new attorney working with people's lives and practicing on people's lives, we're going to mess up, and we don't want our clients' lives to be hindered or their cases to go poorly because of our own pride. So I'd encourage you to really practice humility on all levels. All right. I am going to move on. I'm using up my time. So I'm going to move on to talking about serving clients and really focusing this from a public interest perspective. My argument is that no matter what background I have, where I've come from, when I interact with clients, they now see me as I'm part of the system. And as an attorney, I probably can't understand exactly what their experience is if they are looking at losing their house, if they're on disability income, if they will become homeless if they leave their abuser. I think that attorneys get put into a place in clients' minds most of the time. And they, as much empathy and compassion as we might have, and live experience, a lot of the time I don't think that they can get it because we are an attorney. We have all the power. We put on the suit and we get to go into the judge's, office and shut the door and have a conversation and come back laughing and say, okay, everything's ready. Here's your papers. We don't get to say that we completely understand everything they're going through. And I think that it's important to recognize that difference, especially in COVID, where we've all been fatigued, we've all been hypersensitive or hypervigilant. We've all had new demands on us, though we've gotten to move forward in our careers. We've gotten to keep our jobs largely. Most of us didn't lose our health insurance. Most of us were not challenged with potential homelessness because of COVID. And so as we continue to work with people who've been impacted more seriously than most of us, or just differently from us, and they can't understand maybe that we understand their experiences more than they realize, we need to be mindful of those things. As traumatic as any of this experience has been on us, and as stressful as this experience has been on us, the stressors that our clients are bringing with them, even if it has nothing to do with COVID itself, they're coming to us in a moment of crisis, and usually multiple crises all at once. And so as much as we've talked about self-care in the last year, as much as we've talked about being easy on ourselves and doing what works for us, we need to give that same and more consideration to our clients. One of the things that happens when we're in this mode, so we may remember this from an old biology class or something, but the amygdala interprets information. Is it a threat or not? If something's considered a threat, our sympathetic nervous system kicks in, and we are ready for action. And a lot of the time that's when we've met a client, they're ready to do something about what's happening in their lives. Maybe they've tried to ignore it as long as they can, and now it's blowing up. Being ready for action is the opposite mode of healing and rest and being able to take time to contemplate and be thoughtful and all of these nice ideas. When our clients are in survival mode, they are dealing with a lack of focus, changes in memory, fatigue, they're emotionally reactive. They forget often to take care of their basic needs, and tend to act more impulsively. Well, those are terrible client qualities. Those are not things that we wish to see in our clients. And so we need to be the cushion there. We need to deal with those changes. And so I would just encourage anyone as they work through these things and are starting to work, especially with clients in high need, that they're mindful that COVID actually may be the closest thing to us often experiencing the level of crisis that some of them have been experiencing for years for many different things. So just for a moment or two, I'd like to talk about kind of what strengths you can bring to working with clients. And I would argue that young lawyers are often going to be able to be a strength in some of these things, like the poor college student resourcefulness. So like when I was a college student and I needed access to a fax, I found that there is a website where I can fax things for free. If I can provide that to my client, they don't have to go find the library, which is now closed because of COVID, or come up with the 15 cents per page to fax. We have apps on our phones that can scan, so it's not a JPEG that they're sending a picture. They can actually scan stuff to us as long as they have a smartphone. So for just a moment, if you have little tricks that you have discovered, like online tools in particular, that has made not being in person easier. I would love to hear those. And as any chat comments come in, I will pass this over to Susan to wrap us up on the employer side of things.
Thanks, Fawn. You want to move us to the next slide? So why are employers considering a hybrid model? Many of your offices may already be doing this. Land of Lincoln is moving in that direction. One of the things that is important is the ability to retain staff who have done well, who have found these healthy habits, who have been productive when they're working from home. And other offices are going to use the hybrid model. If your employer isn't, are you going to go looking elsewhere? So one of the things that your employer may be looking at is, what are the things that you have been doing while working from home that would make it still a good option for you to continue working from home? Think through what it is about working from home that worked well for you. I have some of my staff attorneys who have been extremely more productive working from home because they had a complete minimization of interruptions. They were able to focus. People weren't in their office talking. They weren't going around talking to everybody else. And so that's one of the things that they'll talk to me about when they're going to be considering trying to telecommute in the future. Another thing that employers are looking at in this area is recruiting new staff. If you have staff openings and you are not going to allow some version of telecommuting, maybe the new employees that are out there looking for jobs don't want to work for you. They've had experience working from home, know that they can do it well, and they want the ability to at least ask for that option. It does allow employers to make use of limited office space. So one of the things that Land of Lincoln has really been dealing with is some growing pains in the midst of COVID. We had some additional funding, we got to hire additional staff, and then the offices were scrambling with, where do we create home workspaces in the building for them? And so one of the things that we've thought about is office sharing. But if you're going to office share, you probably need to work from home part of the time. I know larger firms have been kind of working these areas for a while. And so that's something that offices are using in this hybrid model. Plus, my favorite of the day is having some version of the ability to work from home means that you can say to your employee who has some symptoms of something, they don't feel 100%, but they just, in the past would come into work because you have to work, they got to get this thing done, and then they're infecting the entire office with their germs. In this work from home option, they could just work at their house. They've got their laptop, they could work from home and not spread their germs around everyone. So those are just some of the reasons why employers are looking to embrace a hybrid model as we come out of COVID. And if you are the employee looking to make that pitch, just be thinking, what has worked well, or what do you think could work well? What are the pros for you being able to do that in the future? Turning to the next point, what are the, go ahead with the slide, Fawn. What are the concerns that employers are going to address when they're using the hybrid model? It really is a puzzle piece to try and figure out how to use a hybrid, how to use it well, and your staffing. And so when the employer is thinking about that, they should really get staff feedback. Land of Lincoln did a survey a couple months ago now, just asking people about their concerns, their feelings. Some people are going to be anxious about coming back into the office after COVID. Some people are going to be anxious about being around people because we've been so sequestered. I will tell you, I'm generally a people person, but this has really made me feel anxious when there are more people in my building, because I'm just not used to that level of people. Others have a huge desire to be back in the office, to be back around people, to be back with their work family. And then employers have to address the fact that if you have a hybrid model and you are going to let some people work part of the time from home and you may deny other people, there's going to be envy. There will be jealousy. And so you have to be able to address that and have clear factors that you are looking at when you're trying to decide if someone is going to be able to work from home or not. Another concern is the office culture piece that Fawn talked about. For those employees who came on board when we were completely remote, they the only office culture they know is, ooh, we have these video staff meetings. As you're coming back into the office, how do you bring them into the team? If you are going to let some people continue to work from home part-time, how do you continue to build that office culture? And so we're going to bring some of the things that worked well from our remote work into the future. And so I think that longer term, there will still be video meetings. Whether you like that idea or not, it does mean that you can interact with people if you're not all in the same space. One of the things that Land of Lincoln did throughout COVID was to schedule weekly management team meetings. And so our administrative team and our managing attorneys were on a video call once a week with each other. In the past, we would have gotten together as a group maybe 3 times a year. And so this meant that we are much more connected throughout this whole process. We've been able to form stronger bonds, and it provides just a better team atmosphere for the entire program. And so that's something that's gonna continue. Our board has been meeting virtually, and for many public interest organizations, you have client board members who really struggle to get to meetings when they're required to be in person. And now you can actually have everybody come in by video, or part of the people come in by video, and make it more accessible for people. Mentoring. How does mentoring happen if you've got people still working from home at time? And so the video chat is another piece. I know many of you are law students. In fact, I think there are several of our office's law students on this training, and we've been doing a lot of remote supervision even this summer. And so you figure out how to do it. We're a Microsoft office, so we have Teams. We use GoToMeeting for a while. We've got Zoom accounts, so there are lots of options. And then there's always the good old-fashioned phone. So you figure out how you can do it, but you have to be intentional about it. Onboarding new staff. Fawn knows from personal experience, like the onboarding of someone remotely. And so as I've brought in new staff, I've actually made the intentional choice that they would be onboarded in person. And so I just felt like that was a better fit for them to be able to feel like they were part of the culture. It meant also, like, I had the benefit of hiring a few at a time, so we could come in together, they could form their little cohort. But if going forward, you are going to hire someone and you're going to let them work remotely, and maybe they live in a different state when they start, how do you onboard them? What worked well during COVID that we can bring into the future? And then communication. Zoom fatigue is real, so you don't want to overuse it going forward. You also need to think about whether the platform you're using is really working well. And I think, that was one of the things that Land of Lincoln switched to. We've been a Microsoft Office for a really long time. And Teams existed in what we were paying for, and we just weren't using it. And we were using GoToMeeting and paying for it, and it didn't give everybody access to set up meetings. And then we finally just said, this is crazy. So we're switching. And so don't always stay committed to whatever you're using. If there's another platform that works better, go try it out. And then going to that final slide, Fawn, what are the work from home policies going to look like? We're still tweaking our long-term work from home policy at Land of Lincoln. But one of the things that employers have to consider when they're setting it up, that employees will then have to wrestle with, is what is the baseline level expected of in-office work? And Land of Lincoln historically has had a very strong preference for your work being in the office. So what is that going to look like going forward? And how do you address the fact that for the past 15 months, we've not been working in the office, and things have continued to happen. We've been able to continue serving clients. So how do you address that? When you're looking at work from home policies, you too also have to look at job responsibilities. And sometimes we had people working from home because we had to, but it wasn't the best way to be able to do their job. And so can the job really be done well from home? Are there things that we learned in the last 15 months that made us realize there were jobs we thought couldn't be done from home that now can be? Or is there, we just did the best we could during the time, and we really need to have certain job responsibilities done in the office. I will tell you, for like the first 3 months of the pandemic, I was the mail person. I was in the office every day because the rest of my staff were completely working from home. And so I not only was there to get the mail, but I was also there to send out everybody's mail, and mail takes a lot of time. And it's something that has to be done in person. Like you can't really do the mail very well not in person. So that's one of those things, that job responsibility has to be done in the building. Work from home policies have to consider productivity. And like I mentioned, I have some people who are very social when they're in the office. And if they have that taken away from them, they're so much more productive. Whether they realize that that's why that's happening or not, I don't know. But where are your team members the most productive? And does the task being done make a difference? And so I think, as you consider work that's done, if you're writing a brief, maybe you're a lot more productive writing that brief at home. But if you're actually having to have a meeting amongst all of the housing attorneys, maybe that works better in the building. And then another piece is just, how do you do that collaboration and team building? How can it be done when most of the staff is in the office and you still have some people working remotely? We've been functioning in a world where we're largely remotely, but as we shift back and have more of us in the office, how do you do a Zoom meeting when 15 people are in one room and 2 people are not? And so those are things that you have to consider when you're drafting work from home policies or when you're responding to them as the employee. And so maybe if you're making the pitch to work from home, you say, I'll come in for staff meetings. But if I'm going to be just working on pleadings and drafting and that kind of stuff, then I'm going to work from home a couple days a week. So that's kind of the employer perspective. And if anybody has any other thoughts or questions, you could either throw them up in the chat, or you could just unmute yourself real quick if you'd like. Jessica had a couple notes in the chat about the evaluation form and resources. And if nobody has said anything further, I'll turn it back over to Jessica.
Thanks, Susan, and thanks to Susan and Fawn for presenting with us today. As a reminder, if you're seeking CLE credit, that evaluation link is in the chat. Also, the last of this particular part of our virtual pro bono CLE series for those who are the attorneys will be in July and will be on LGBTQ advocacy. So please join us for that as well. You can register and get the link if you haven't already. And for everyone who needs more information, if you do, about our pro bono programs, you can find that on our website as well. And for the interns and fellows, as Brent mentioned, we are going to have a 30-minute add-on discussion, and any attorneys are welcome to join us for that as well. But thanks so much for presenting with us today. We appreciate it. And thanks to you all for being here.
Thank you, Susan and Fawn. I always like to say dozens of muted claps to our speakers, so thank you.
And yes, any last minute questions, feel free to throw them in there.